Hello YouTube. It's a beautiful day. We're in this car, but we are outside technically, windows down, getting a nice little breeze. Sun is shining. People are out. We're talking about books. Today I wanted to talk about No Longer at Ease by Chinua Achebe. This is the second novel in the African trilogy. Now, Achebe's African trilogy starts with Things Fall Apart, then it goes to No Longer at Ease, and after that it's Arrow of God. So No Longer at Ease is the second novel in this trilogy. And I believe this trilogy only was called a trilogy after the fact that these three books were written, because while they are tied together, I don't think they're that solidly tied together. Now, what ties this one to the first one? Well, the main character in No Longer at Ease, the second novel, is the grandson of the main character in the first novel. So, Okonkwo. And they both share that name. So, Okonkwo in the first novel, his grandson is Obi Okonkwo. And that's what No Longer at Ease concerns. It concerns his story. Now, in the first novel, in Things Fall Apart, I quite enjoyed that novel. It gave an interesting and unique insight, an insight that I personally never had of pre-colonial Nigeria. And I thought some of the traditions and cultural aspects of that society were interesting. Now, that novel ended with the dramatic and you could say evident tragic capitulation of that culture in the face of the colonial British Empire. Now, No Longer at Ease is pretty much 30, 40 years after this novel, after the first novel. And this is happening in the late 40s after World War II, definitely before the 60s. So maybe it's probably the 1950s that this is happening. I don't think there's an exact date that I can cite exactly this novel occurring in, but I'm pretty sure it is before the 60s, but it's definitely, I'm almost certain it's after World War II, because a few boys from World War II are mentioned in this novel. A few people one big boy who we don't want to really talk about too much. At least YouTube doesn't like talking about him. Actually, YouTube loves talking about that big boy, the big boy, AH. But sometimes if not uncertified people talk about AH, bad things happen. Okay, so back to the novel. So Okonkwo is similar to his grandfather. He's a bit stubborn, a bit of, in some ways, he's quite masculine, but it's much toned down from his. I shouldn't say he's that masculine, but he is very stubborn, like his grandfather. What does that even mean, masculine? Now, he does enjoy poetry though quite a lot, and he ends up getting a scholarship. Essentially, he gets funded by his village to go study overseas in England. Ooh la la. That's a big deal. And he studies English literature. Everyone wanted him to study law, kind of something like that, so that their village could interpret the law and kind of, go around laws and stuff like that. Nope, but he ended up studying English. And he is back in Nigeria. He comes back to Nigeria. Now, this novel is it begins at the end. It's an inverted story. So it begins after the climax, essentially, during the how do we call it, the denouement, the where everything is supposed to kind of be resolved. It kind of begins there, and the plot point, the issue that this novel concerns, is bribery. So Obi Okonkwo has been found guilty. He's been charged, essentially, with bribery, with having been bribed in order to sort of pass. He gets a very prominent position in a sort of administrative and bureaucratic position, and he ends up accepting a bribe. Now, throughout most of the novel, this is the theme. Bribes are spoken about well before he even engages with bribes. The morality of bribes, whether bribes are just, and the novel does concern, I would say, that's one of the main themes in the novel, or perhaps not a theme, but a subject. The nature of bribery, essentially, is this subject. Now, other themes include wealth and social status. So as Okonkwo acquires wealth from his pretty well-off government job, he also acquires certain tools, these white man tools. Basically a car, essentially. One of these boys. He gets one of these, not quite this fancy. He gets like a pretty old car, but that's a big deal then. Getting a 1940s car in his time, that's a big deal. He is a big shot. And he's telling everyone, I got a car, and everyone is like, whoa, you got a car? It's a big deal. He's the big cheese. But not as much, because with a car comes insurance, comes upkeep. Now, insurance is a big thing in this novel. Money, making ends meet. And with this car, Okonkwo has to pay the insurance, and that's enormously expensive, even for a bureaucrat at his level. And I guess it goes to the imbalance of wealth between the European civilized societies and these Igbo villages. Poetry is mentioned quite often. This novel also got to a point at which I thought it was perhaps going to be a romance story. It kind of retreated from that path, though, and it's not much of a romance story. But Okonkwo also, on that subject, Okonkwo falls in love in London, and there is an Igbo girl there that he engages in a relationship with, and they eventually get engaged. However, the big issue is that she is a Osu. And an Osu is essentially someone, from what I understand, their ancestors have been worshipping bad gods, so they've been shamed. Their lineages are shamed, and she is an Osu. Even though everything else, she's quite spotless, it seems. I mean, personality-wise, she's okay. She's a bit. She's not the worst character, but she's very smart. She's very attractive, but she's an Osu, and this creates issues with Okonkwo and his family, essentially, who discouraged this, and also the greater community, which discouraged this. Now, this sort of relationship with Clara, this relationship that is not okayed by the Igbo society, even though the vast majority, pretty much the bulk of them, have converted to Christianity. And Okonkwo's father is a very prominent Christian preacher. Even though this society is still Christian, they still cling on to, the society has been converted into Christianity, they still cling on to some of these old tenets. And Okonkwo essentially dismissing these tenets, or attempting to dismiss these tenets, creates a parallel between him engaging with this sort of colonized white world, having a car, becoming a part of this bureaucratic colonial machine. These are parallels that both spell Okonkwo's demise. Now, whether the nature of bribery is something that is particular to African countries, as in whether this nature of the tribes helping each other and bribery as a way to bypass bureaucracy, or whether bribery is a result of this colonial bureaucracy. So essentially, is bribery part of these Igbo cultures and these African cultures? Because we see they are quite widespread in these African cultures to this day. Or is it a result of colonial bureaucracy, and that's the only way to bypass it? Is it a question of nature? Is bribery just normal in these cultures, even before this bureaucracy? Or is it a way to bypass this bureaucracy? And that's a question that I thought maybe might have been pushed into, may have been prodded about a bit in the novel, but not as much as I would have liked. Essentially, I think Achebe would agree with the latter. Bribery is a result of bypassing colonial bureaucracy, which I'm not sure if I agree with. No. I think that the tribal nature of Africa is a bit too difficult to distill in a nation state and a bureaucratic apparatus. Now, I can't say that I enjoyed this novel as much as Things Fall Apart. In truth, No Longer at Ease was very often quite bland and boring, and it seemed very slice of life. Not too much happens in the plot other than Okonkwo kind of living his life, going to, I would say, going to different places in the city. You can tell that this is a completely different world than the first novel, Things Fall Apart. But I did find it a bit stale, a bit boring. I just didn't really enjoy this part of the world, this sort of, I guess this plot, this really weak plot in this novel. Whereas in the first book, the plot was very weak. However, the world itself was interesting to me. Understanding about these different cultural dynamics was interesting. I did not feel that with this novel. It is weak on the plot. It is interesting in a sense if you want to get insight into, I guess, bureaucratic structures in colonial Africa or Nigeria, but other than that, it can be a bit boring. But it is not too long of a novel, 200 pages. Whether I'm going to read the third one in this installment, Arrow of God, I'm not sure. Currently I'm reading a few other books, and I can't say that I'm thinking about reading it too strongly. That's not a can't say that I'm too eager to read it right now, but perhaps in the future. Anyways, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.